Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Ins and Outs with Lynn and Liam. I am Liam and that is Lynn. And today we are going to do it a little bit differently than we usually do. So instead of talking about sex in the news this week, we are paying homage to the one and only Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Notorious RPG. We just thought, it's a really great time to talk about all the achievements she's had and some of the quirky things about her life that not everybody might know.
Right, yeah. So Liam, when did you find out that she passed away? How did you find out?
I was in a gas station in Lewiston on my way to a bonfire, and I was picking up some drinks, and we were at the cashier, and I pulled out my phone because my family had been texting me, and I didn't respond. I didn't look at their text right away, and I pull out my phone, and I see it pops up and says, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died, and I, was like, oh my God, she's dead. And Jay was like, who's dead? What are you talking about?
Yeah. I'm surprised you had cell phone service in Lewiston.
I know. I mean, Lewiston's not that bad of a cell phone.
I never have cell phone service anywhere north of like Pine Avenue, Niagara Falls, including Lewiston.
Really?
I found out from our boss, he is like always plugged in. And so he posts like something like RBG exclamation point. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to find out. And like he had it before like CNN had it. It was, of course he did. Like literally it wasn't even like a top news story. You know how you type RBG and it says like she died. It was like not even at that point yet. So I feel like I was among like the exclusive 1%, thanks to our boss who is like a news buff.
Yeah, my family had been texting for like 15 minutes about it without me like looking at my phone. And so I was like, oh, shoot, I could have like learned it a while before if I would have just like paid attention to my family.
Yeah, to be honest, I avoided thinking about RBG at all times because anytime I thought about her, I got very stressed out. And so when I saw that, I thought I'd be more, obviously I was upset, but I feel like in my brain, I was just like, the next time I hear about RBG, it's going to be bad news. Mm-hmm. And so I was less stressed than I was just from like randomly seeing a tweet about her like going to the gym or whatever in like last year.
Yes, I like every time like I would get a news notification that started with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, my heart would like sink. And it was always just like she just got out of the hospital, she just like had a lung infection. But like every time I was like, this is gonna be it, this is it. And then it was.
Yeah, I had to like stop. I went and watched the movie. I was just like, I'm sure the movie's really great, but I can't watch this. It'll just like give me too much sleeplessness.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say when it happened, like I was like heartbroken. And we like talked about it a little bit. Actually, like me and Jay got back to our car and our friend was sitting in the car and we're like, oh my God, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dead. And she goes, who? And me and Jay were like, what are you talking about? Who?
Yeah, none of the teens at the center knew who she was.
Oh man, it's rough.
Yeah. Maybe some of the older ones, but none of the ones who are like in 9th or 10th grade.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't. I didn't know who she was in 9th or 10th grade either, so.
So, well, I really like the Supreme Court, so I, at one point, could name all the justices. I probably still could if I really thought about it. So the article that I really liked, and I sent it to you, so you and I both love Nina Totenberg. Mm-hmm. Love her. She's one of my favorite NPR news reporters. I didn't know that they had been like best buds for the last 50 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's actually some controversy around that. Did you see that?
I did. I was going to mention that, yeah.
Do you know, my best friend in the world is a news reporter. And so I think I have a weird feeling about it because I get like, so you're like, I don't know, like what if I rise to some sort of like local celebrity status, that means like his integrity, I don't know. I just have like a weird feeling about the judgment. Maybe we should have known about it, right? But whatever. Yeah. But I think their friendship makes so much sense that now that you think about it, because they're both like pretty tough cookies, you know?
Yeah.
And like really straightforward and like, you know, you look at them, you don't like expect them to be like super duper fierce, but then they are. And so like, of course they were best buds. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fine for them to be best friends. I think the main the article I read was just that the NPR didn't like let people know about it right away. And it took them like a while But I mean, like definitely by the end, everybody knew they were good friends. But at the beginning, when Nina was like the head correspondent for the Supreme Court, that is definitely a bit of a conflict of interest.
Maybe. I guess when you're reporting on the Supreme Court, though, you're really just saying, like, this is their decision. And it doesn't really, I guess it doesn't really, it's not like the justices are, like, talking to Nina Totenberg, right? I don't think that there's, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I've never heard, like, the Supreme Court sided on the ACA on this, and we talked to Antonin Scalia, and he said this. Like, they're kind of, like, not engaged with the media. So I guess I see it as less of a conflict.
I think so. Like one of the things was in her article that you're referencing originally, she talked about how when she had cancer, nobody told Nina as a friend, even though her husband was helping Ruth, because they didn't want to put her in that situation where she would have to report on it because of like her journalistic integrity and stuff like that. So I think that's the problem is like where, like when you're friends with someone, where is like that line between like them talking about their personal lives and you needing to report about it because of the thing.
Right. But I do think they followed it because she didn't even tell her.
Yeah.
I did really like, so, we know RBG is really sassy. In the Nina Totenberg NPR article, they talk about how Nina Totenberg was trying to get into some sort of country club and she was trying to be like one of the first women and she got rejected. And so like RBG like totally trolled them. She like went there for a tour and then like went through like the motions and then was like, well, I don't know if any club that's too good for Nina Totenberg is too good for me. And I just like the idea, like she like, it's not like she just rejected them, it didn't even go. She like went through with the tour.
Yeah.
She like pretended she was interested in joining and just was like, psych, which was pretty cool.
So I was reading some articles about like the difference between this like notorious RBG concept that we have about her and who she really was like as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because like she was like really outspoken and she was really tough, but at the same time she wasn't like rude or mean. She was good friends with like Anthony Scalia, one of the most conservative judges on the court. She was good friends with Sandra Day O'Connor, who was also a really big conservative on the court. And so I think it's important that we understand like the difference between like her pop culture kind of 2013 rise and this idea we have about her versus like who she really was as a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, she said that she had like this belief that you had to be like, she said, a little bit deaf once in a while and just like be able to like tone out, like ignore when somebody says something to you that you just like don't like. Yes. Which I think is, first, I don't know if deaf is the right word, but I do think it's probably good advice, right? Like you can't fight with everybody about everything. Yeah.
Do you know who gave her that advice?
Was it her like mother-in-law?
It was her mother-in-law on her wedding night. She was like,
that's good relationship advice.
It is. It's good advice for everything. Just like selective listening is really important.
Yeah. I do like that she always, and yeah, you're right. She wasn't like this tough A. My phrase is tough AB, which is to avoid the swear words. She like was kind of like she was still her same person, just like pretty fierce about it, right? Like, so when her professor like sexually harassed her, she was like, do not do that, right? She didn't like get in his face or anything. She just like asserted herself, which I really like. I do struggle. So as somebody who identifies as a tough baby, I find that many people idolize Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but when they are up and close to a tough woman, they are maybe less idolizing of the up close. Like, so like if there are many people who interact with me who think I'm like too assertive, right? But then at the same time, they're like admiring Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it's like there's a little disconnect between that in my brain.
Definitely, I can see that. I mean, I think that happens a lot in life, right? Where we can like really love these qualities about someone, but then like when we're actually like put to those qualities like in our face, it can be hard to accept them.
Yeah, it's just a little frustrating when I see like stories on Instagram, and I'm like, I don't know. Once you told me I should be a little more ladylike, so
maybe you shouldn't. One thing I love about Ruth is that she loved the opera. And I too actually like enjoy opera, which people always like find like so weird or stupid.
I'm shocked by that.
Right? But it's like so beautiful. Also a lot of operas like are around mythology, and so like they're really beautiful like mythological tales and stuff like that. Or they're about like ancient Egypt. My favorite thing though is that Ruth's favorite opera was something called, and it's in Italian, so I'm probably gonna butcher it, Mini in la Fanciulla del West, which is an Italian opera about the American Wild West.
Oh, it is funny.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like back in the like 50s and 60s, right? They had those like spaghetti westerns from Italy that like that one guy who was really famous was in a bunch of them.
Oh, that one guy who was really famous.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood started in these spaghetti westerns, and so this like Italian opera, which is probably like really beautiful, reminds me of just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg listening to an opera about an Italian western.
That's actually really funny. Did you see all the pictures? Did you see she was in an opera a few years ago?
Yes,
Yeah, I really do like that she liked the opera.
that was
And
in
that
her
she,
RBG documentary that she was in the opera.
that's the one I did see. I didn't watch any other ones because there's
Yeah.
too much.
So I actually saw them when they came out. So I saw like On a Basis of Sex when it first came out, which was pretty good. And then I watched the RBG movie or documentary with Nina Totenberg, which was also really good. The On the Basis of Sex though, because it is like a dramatic tale, it isn't like 100% correct. So after watching that movie, you really should do your own research to figure out what parts of it were really true and what parts were like embellishments, or even like they combined like a couple court cases together to make it seem like it was all just one court case when it was really just like multiple ones.
It's kind of like Hamilton. Like
Is that-
Hamilton is mostly true, but like
Oh,
you can't base your knowledge of the American Revolution on Hamilton because you would be wrong about some things.
yeah, definitely. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's true about everything, right?
Yeah. So one of the articles we also read was about like her popular dissents. And so I took a lot of Supreme Court classes in college because I got my bachelor's degree in public policy. And I sometimes think that I don't think America knows much about how decisions are made, but there's a lot of strategy in like dissents or choosing who to write with or who writes. And so so a lot of the cases she dissented on, so it's not the law of the land, right? Because it wasn't the most popular, but the value is that like dissents can be used in future cases to support other things. And so like while she may have like wrote these really great dissents and they're not impactful now, like in 40 years you'll never know who will be like inspired by that dissent and then use it to in a court case that will and be successful at it. And so it's really like a long game. And so I like the idea that in like maybe 30 or 40 years, like something she said will be like really important for a future decision.
And we don't even have to wait that long, right? Her Lily Ledbetter consent led to the Lily Ledbetter Act, which I'm sure a lot of people know about, but it was just this case about sexual discrimination in Florida, maybe?
At like Goodyear?
Yeah, like a Goodyear tire in Florida. And she like, the woman, Lily Ledbetter, she like didn't realize she was being discriminated against for a long time. And then when she did realize, it was too late to file the lawsuit. So the Lily Ledbetter Act that was then later passed in Congress changed the law to allow it. Because sometimes sometimes the Supreme Court, right, they're there to follow the law, even if the law is wrong.
Right.
And so these dissents can show you this law is wrong. It's important that Congress fixes it.
Right, yeah. The other thing that I really like, so I was really, I had a cold in March. It was not COVID, but it felt like COVID. And so I was laying on the couch and I watched the Hillary Clinton documentary. And this makes me think of it because, you know, when you think about RBG or you think about Hillary Clinton, you don't really, it's easy to, so as a woman, I experience sexism all the time, right? But it's more like a passive sexism or a microaggression. And it's really easy to forget that, like, in the lifetime of Hillary Clinton and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they experienced, like, can't get into school, can't get all these benefits, can't open a credit card without a husband. Like, it's really easy to forget that just 40 years ago or 30 years ago, it was like 1,000 times worse. And to think like, it just gives me a whole different level of respect for them both, because I'm not sure I could persevere in a world where like I couldn't get a credit card or an apartment without my husband.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, like, half my friends don't even have husbands, so how would they even do that?
Right. And like, to think my mother, right, my sweet mother is not that old. She's 57. Like, the massive jump that we've made because of people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg is incredible.
My mom, she was born in 52, so she definitely like lived through a lot of this stuff too. And I remember she would tell me as a kid about how she went to Kensington High in Buffalo. And back in those days, girls, women, people weren't allowed to wear pants to school. They still had to wear dresses to school. And she was like the class in Buffalo public schools that protested and started wearing pants to school. And because of like her and her class, they started like allowing girls to wear pants to school.
Right. And today I'm wearing joggers to work. So not only am I wearing pants, I'm wearing like sweatpants.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy like that our parents like had to wear dresses? Like, this is weird.
Right. And it's because of people. And I like, it was just kind of mind blowing to me to think about that. Like, what I was like sick and I'm like, oh my goodness, Hillary Clinton went through so much. And then to think about with RBG, even worse, because she was Hillary was a lawyer, but she like, I think it was a different trajectory, right? Because she had such a relationship with her husband. But like, holy smokes, I don't even know how you become a Supreme Court justice as a woman, even in 1994 or whatever when it happened.
Yeah. And even like today, right? She's being laid to rest in the Capitol today as the first woman to ever be laid to rest in the Capitol. Like, how does that happen? We've had women senators, we've had women House Representative members. Like, how is none of them been laid in the Capitol? Yeah. She's also the first Jewish person.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is also, I actually think that's maybe like a little bit less surprising, but still surprising nonetheless.
I don't know. Maybe, listen, sexism and anti-Semitism is real in this country.
It is. All those isms. One of the things that I didn't know about her that I found in these articles while I was reading about the dissents and agreements she wrote. What are they called? Not agreements.
Rulings? Judgments?
Yeah, maybe the rulings.
Sure.
So one of the rulings that she wrote, which I never knew about, was the Olmsted v. LC ruling in 1999. And it was a 6-3 ruling that said individuals with mental disabilities have the right to community-based housings under the Americans with Disability Acts, which means that, like, so for people that don't know, like, most people who had mental disabilities or anything like that, or intellectual disabilities, when they were, before this law was passed, they were just put into institutions, which were horrible, horrible, horrible places, where they would, like, I used to work in I used to work in a group home, and we would hear stories about it and watch videos about it. And even some of the residents I worked with had lived in these conditions, and they were just appalling. And I never knew that Ruth wrote this like really beautiful ruling about why they have the human right to housing.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, it was in 1999, which is crazy. But even like in New York State, which was like one of the big states to like have this big like news thing happen about how terrible their institutions were. Do you know who broke the story about that? Geraldo Rivera, or whatever that dude's name is. He broke the story about how terrible institutions in New York State were. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that when he had a talk show or after he had a talk show?
I think he got his talk show because of that. Like, he got so much news attention from that story that he got his talk show. And now he's doing Fox News. But think like that wasn't that long ago, right? That was like probably early 90s.
Yeah, like I was alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is wild to think about. We should acknowledge though that Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually had, there were some issues that she wasn't very good on, right? Yeah. She was not great on Native American issues.
No, I never read that.
Yeah, she was not good on Native American issues, although in the recent case where they, which was actually one of the most positive Native American Supreme Court cases in a lifetime. She was on the right side of that, but she does have a history of not necessarily coming down in favor of Native Americans. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it's because she's anti-Native American, right? I think it's easy for us to think of judges as so political, but yeah, I think that they have an interpretation of the Constitution and the law, and so it's like when sometimes John Roberts surprises everybody, right? Yeah. They'll be like, oh my goodness, John Roberts is in the resistance, or you get those stupid headlines because he kind of surprises people, and it's just that's how they interpret the law, and sometimes you agree with it, and sometimes it's not how you agree with it, and that's what being a judge is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the problem, is a lot of times laws themselves are rooted in white supremacy. And so even juries, with things that happen, they have to follow these laws and by the book. But there are ways that you can frame them in different ways. But yeah, she also, Ruth, although she was an adamant supporter of abortion rights, she was actually against the sweeping rules that Roe v. Wade established. She thought that it should have been much more incremental, more like how she did with the sex movement, the equality among the sexes movement. She thought it should have been like that because she thought that the small incremental decisions would have led to stronger abortion rights than just one sweeping thing. Because if ever we revisit it and they decide, Roe v. Wade wasn't done correctly, it's easier to switch just one instead of having to go through all these different court precedents.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she's right?
I think
she did so many small pieces. You're right. It would probably be much more challenging to go back on it.
Yes. Yeah, it's way harder to go back on women's rights stuff because of all these other court rulings that do precedent.
I feel like that was part of her strategy too, right? She was a strategic little lady. I like that, we talked about the court case where she used the man as the example.
Yes. Because
she knew that there were men on the case and the court, and that would be more successful. And by using a man, she then got equal rights for women.
Yeah, and it wasn't even just one court case. It was I think she had 5 or 6 Supreme Court arguments where she was arguing for men's rights to get widow support or Social Security, things like that.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
I feel like there is. Oh, one of the things I found out about her that I also really like is that, her mom always taught her that negative emotions aren't always, sulking and negative emotions aren't an effective use of our energies, which totally agree with. You should feel your emotions, but then you should use those emotions to do something. And so when she was angry and couldn't do anything about it, she would play the piano or cello. And she had a love of music for her entire life. She would, it was the only thing that could distract her from the rigors of being a Supreme Court justice. So when she listened to music, she would just tune out everything else in the world and she could just focus on the music. I think that's really pretty.
Yeah. That is really nice. Interesting.
And there's even a story about how she gets so into something, whether it's music or work or whatever, that for one of her birthdays at the Supreme Court, they had 50 people in her office and she didn't even notice because she was writing a briefing or something.
Yeah, I read that too. It's very funny to think about.
Yeah.
Just her in the zone. And she's so little, so the idea of her this little lady not even realize, it's just very sweet.
Yeah, I like it.
There are a lot of people out there who are oh, we shouldn't really idolize people like we do, but I just don't agree. I don't think people idolize her for her opinions as much as they do for her actions, right? And so when people are yeah, she was good, but she was bad on these issues and we shouldn't be celebrating her. It's can we just celebrate the fact that this lady who was little and really, she's timid looking, she wasn't even really aggressive in spirit, and she's a woman, and why wouldn't we celebrate that? Yeah,
we can celebrate the spirit of a person, right? And not have to agree with everything about them.
Yeah, I think we forget that in 2020.
Yeah, a lot of people who have been amazing people have done amazing stuff, aren't perfect. We're all humans, right? We all make mistakes sometimes. And we all have like, views about things that maybe we wouldn't agree with. And so if we, we have to hold people accountable and understand that they're flawed and understand like, yeah, she had bad rulings when it comes to like Native American rights. And I'm sure she has other bad rulings, but she also had good ones.
Right. And she also like had positive personality traits that are to be admired.
Yeah. I would say even like the fact that she could be friends with Anthony Scalia and Sandra Day O'Connor and other conservative justices is like a good quality trait.
Although some people, the same people who are saying we shouldn't idolize people, are using that as an example of why we shouldn't.
Why we shouldn't idolize her?
Yeah, because they're saying like, well, she was friends with people who were against all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, like I have family who I wholeheartedly disagree with, and I will still be sad when they die.
Yeah,
right.
I even have good friends who I choose to hang out with. I have no blood relation to them. I don't need to hang out with them, but I choose to hang out with them, and they have different political ideas than I do. And like, it's annoying when we have to like fight about it, which we try not to fight about it. But I think like people aren't always bad just because of like one thought they have. Definitely some people are bad because of thoughts they have, but it's a hard, like the world's not black and white, right? It's a murky situation.
Right. No heroes is one of my phrases, because everybody has, even if you have bad beliefs, you're not necessarily a bad person. Or you could be a bad person in some ways and a good person in other ways, right?
Definitely.
Although I am also in support of unfriending people who have fundamental disagreements about like justice. So it's complicated.
I haven't unfriended a lot of people, but I have like unfollowed them or like snoozed their posts for 30 days just because I'm like, I can't deal with this.
I've noticed some people have unfriended me.
Oh.
And you know what I say? See, I'm not even heard about that.
I got unfriended by one person one time, and I was like, wow, I can't believe they actually unfriended me. But then I was like, whatever.
I got blocked by somebody recently.
Oh, I
didn't even say anything to them either. And I only realized it because I went to find them and they weren't there. So then I told my husband to go to look them up and he could see them. And I was like, oh, blocked. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask him about it next time I see him, because that's the kind of tough cookie I am.
Kind of tough questions you got to ask.
Hey, why'd you unfriend me? Why'd you block me? We didn't talk about Marty, but I also just really admire that that everybody comments on their marriage.
Yes. Yeah.
And that Marty was an angel. Like, it must have been really how many men out there would be willing to be married to somebody who's like working and powerful in 1970?
Yeah.
He was probably so progressive.
I mean, I think he was progressive in some ways, definitely, but in other ways, right, like, she had to raise their child while going to school, right? Like, he wasn't picking up much of the slack. And she had to help him like through his first cancer bout when they were in college. She had to write all his papers for him. And I don't think he ever was like, hey, you want me to write your papers for you?
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, I mean, their love was immaculate. I never want to judge anybody's relationship. People probably look at me and Jay and think like, I don't know, like people wouldn't think me and Jay have the perfect relationship, but I love him and I love our relationship. And so I think, yeah,
I think you and Jay's relationship seems great.
Thank you.
People think me and Pat's relationship is weird.
Yeah, I mean, people, if you don't conform to people's ideas, then they think you're weird. So. Yeah.
Let's see. Did I have any other thoughts? No, I think we covered it. This week I typed my notes.
Yes, it's a very important conversation. Not that our conversations aren't always really important, but like, paying homage. It's
more important than the tail shape of sperm. I can agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's more important than the tail shape of sperm or
my article, if we didn't do it this week, was going to be about the Vietnamese company that was rinsing condoms and reusing them. Yeah. So like this, although that is actually really important, and we're going to talk about that. This seems like a little more like lifelong, systematically important.
Definitely. And so we've often said like we don't want to talk about current events, which I don't want to talk about current events. But the reason why I thought like we could talk about Ruth was because even though her death is a current event, the things we're talking about have happened in the past. And so the reason I don't like to talk about current events is because we don't have like a specter of history that we can look at them through. And so like we might get things wrong, misinformation, stuff like that if we do current events. And I don't want to like have any misinformation. I don't want to have any like having to like come back and like retract something we said. So that's why I thought it was okay to do the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but not some of the other current events that are happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, thank you, Liam. Am I going to see you next week for a topic about Vietnamese condom companies that are rinsing condoms?
We will definitely see that for next week. We also have some updates. We are trying to turn this into a podcast. I have been told by some of my friends that they would love to listen to this show, but they can't sit around and listen to it on Zoom, and they would prefer to listen to it on a podcast. And I said, that's totally right.
Yeah, the problem with the YouTube is you have to leave your window. Like, you can't listen to a YouTube video while doing other things on your phone.
So that's what people are saying. So we do have our podcast uploaded onto a hosting website. And now I'm working with iTunes to get them approved. And then I'm going to work with Google to get them on Google Play. So they should be all set by hopefully next week.
Awesome. Cool. Smash that subscribe button. And like us in the iTunes, Apple, or podcast store whenever that starts.
Leave us a good review because it'll help us show up on other people's things.
I'm just going to have my husband leave a bunch of reviews.
Right.
He's never listened to the show, but I'm sure he thinks it's great.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Liam. See you.
Thank you. Adios.